Bigger than cake.
Give me some sadness.
Yeah, I was looking forward to it, and then I watched it.
Oh, dry.
Hello, welcome to Bigger Than Capes roundup for October 22. Am I right? I think I'm right.
You are correct. In the month and year.
Yay!
Angela and Will joining me, Zach. Did I say I'm Zach?
We have now.
I don't know. I can't remember 3 sentences ago. It's no good asking me.
Managed to make that into a really nonsensical, wrapped up within itself introduction.
It began so strong as well.
Yeah, I knew the name of the podcast, so everything after that, I guess, is an accomplishment.
Yeah, it's a bonus.
Or not. In lieu of not having much news or stuff, should we just dive right into this one?
I think we should crack on, yeah.
Give the people what they want.
Hard.
And what they need.
Hard reviews.
Reviews of hard things.
So, if you're new here, basically, we're just going to talk about 4 first issues from October, and I'm going to start with Image Comics' Dark Ride number 1, written by Josh Williamson, or Joshua Williamson as he's known here. The art is by Andre Bresson. The colorist is Adriano Lucas, and the letterer is Pat Brosseau, is how I'm saying it this week.
I'd back that for
Works.
Sure.
Yeah.
Good. I'm glad we're all on the same page.
Mm-hmm.
If we're wrong together.
Yeah.
It's all we can ever ask. So, Dark Ride basically begins with the story of Arthur Dante, a theme park ride designer who is somewhat obsessed with horror and the occult and, all that good stuff. Okay, so spoilers, I guess we have to... And it's not really a spoiler, because this was like the preview pages that have been at the end of all the comics.
It's also a first issue, nothing major.
Yeah,
nothing too major is going to get spoiled here.
So Arthur, in an argument with his wife over his failing ride, The Devil's Due, just kills his wife, as you do.
Mm-hmm.
And then when he goes to bury her alive... No, not bury her alive, bury her dead. The traditional kind of burial.
Post-murder.
Yeah. Her body kind of starts talking to him and making him all kinds of sweet promises about, what he could have had, because his life's over now, because he just murdered someone. Then miraculously we see that he years later is the owner of a successful theme park by the name of Devilland. Devilland is basically just a giant theme park which is very horror inspired, and you know what, looks pretty dope. Can't knock it. We then kind of transition from Arthur's story to the story of Owen Season's killer name, who has basically just got the most low level job working in this theme park. It's his first day and he's super enthusiastic to be working in this theme park. From his point of view, we kind of get to know the theme park and the other members of staff. We're introduced to the security guards and the people watchers and the mascots. His immediately in command supervisor person, Katie, and we're also introduced to Sam Hain and Halloween, who are the kids of Arthur Dante, who are both just coincidentally in the park today on Owen's first day. It's quite a lot of information crammed in. It's an oversized issue. It's 50-ish pages, maybe 48. But I think a lot is packed into this with the flashback and the introduction of a fucking massive list of characters.
Yeah.
We've written them all out in the chat, but it's kind of unclear how many are going to matter and how many are going to just be names I think Alistair the Cleaner, who is the character that's going to be most essential out of the list I've made.
I mean, I'm with you there.
Absolutely, yeah.
Not the conspiracy theorist James Tynion the Fourth stand-in. I'm convinced that's an homage.
I feel like it must be.
Yeah.
Right?
He's such a big name in horror at the moment, and it's too much of a likeness.
Yeah, definitely. I was quite into this. I think it's a decent setup, and it kind of got darker than I expected it to do, or at least got darker than I expected it to be, faster than I expected it to get there. I think Owen is a likable protagonist. Arthur is kind of a vague protagonist, and I'm kind of intrigued by Sam and Halloween. Well, Sam Hain and Halloween, largely based on names, but also based on the look at the characters we get here. What do you guys think?
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, the first Owen where he kills his wife, kills the nagging wife, I was just like, that's a trope, innit? And then I was quite pleased that, the nagging wife, he heard the voice of a weird devil coming from her grave. That kind of pepped things up a little bit. Owen's really nice, which, not to spoil the ending, but damn that ending. So yeah, he was revealed. There is a lot, but it is a theme park, and so you're going to have a lot of people in a well-designed theme park, which is well-designed. Like, all the art on the theme park and the rides is actually really, really good. But yeah, so many people. Also, is it pronounced Samhain or Samhain? But anyway, that's by the by, because
they started calling him Sam quickly enough.
That was my assumption.
I'm like, I'm sure there's going to be some people who are like, it has to pronounce Samhain. Anyway, can't really put it. Then you shorten it to Sam. That doesn't work at all, does it, guys? But yeah, what a coincidence there in the park on Owen's first day. I really liked. I think one of my favourite bits was where he sort of calls Kate, because Katie's Kingston. And he's like, "Oh, you're the king." He's like, just no. Too
early for nicknames.
Too early for this. And he's just so enthusiastic about picking up rubbish, which is his job. And then he gets to clean up the vomit, and it's like, oh yeah, typical first day. He's someone he's very relatable, as opposed to the rich dicks of Samhain and Halloween, who are not relatable in the least. But yeah, I find it weird. It gets weirder the longer. I mean, the opening's weird, but then you sort of go from that weird opening with Arthur, and then you switch to Owen's, just a basic Owen's first day, and it doesn't really feel particularly horrific, apart from, you wouldn't want to clean up vomit. But it's very, it's just a, classic. Here's the new guy. Here's his new situation. Here's his new workplace. Yeah, it's a weird, creepy devil land, but there's nothing particularly weird. And then it sort of transitions towards the end into something really rather dark and weird. And I don't know how I feel about that, because I feel like there was a massive tonal shift. Maybe it was there all along and I missed it. But yeah, just odd. That's how I'm describing it, odd.
Just odd. I think I'm probably a little bit closer to Zach on this one. It's probably not my favourite book of the week, but providing it's such a long issue, I actually kind of think it's paced quite well. And as you say, there's a lot of information to go through there, but it never really felt like a slog. And as I just sort of glance over the pages, there's quite a lot of text, but I think the voices sound quite natural, and it doesn't feel like you are being bombarded with information. I think it's delivered quite well. I think the art is decent all around. I must admit, I'm not a huge fan of theme parks, so the kind of iconography that goes with that doesn't do anything in particular for me. But I think the art is solid throughout. I like that the bit with Arthur at the beginning is in black and white, and then the present bit is in colour. I think is a nice shift. Although I'd have been happy if it remained in black and white. I think the art looks great. I agree with you, Angela. It's a bit tropey. I mean, it immediately reminded me of the first season of Fargo, where basically the same conversation and event happens. And I thought, yeah, that's like Fargo. It doesn't pull its punches with the horror, like as you're intimating towards the end. There's some quite visceral depictions of violence towards the end. It kind of comes out of nowhere, but of course, I think it's set up that something truly demonic or amiss is going to be in place from the flashback.
Yeah, definitely.
The voice and the promise and the various things. So I didn't think it was going to get that kind of violent, but I did expect more. I guess I thought it would be more spooky than like horror. Yeah. I actually prefer the kind of more horrifying thing. As I say, as horror not being my first love, I'm often, if I'm not scared by it or not at least creeped out by it, it doesn't do much for me. And at least this has that creepy factor. I also think it sets up a couple of interesting like little mysteries. I think Owen will be our protagonist going forward, despite events, because there's a setup moment with his past on a raft with his sister.
Yeah, it feels that would be pointless to include if this is all the Owen we get.
Just says that his parents died. It was an accident. 1 minute there's 4 of them on the raft, and the next there's 2, and that's all you get. And I think that's a really like compelling mystery as to what has gone on there. So yeah, overall I thought this was actually pretty good. I agree. I think what are they called, Halloween and Sam, they're kind of archetypal rich kids.
Yeah, I think there's space to develop that though.
Yeah, I think this is just the setup, but like Sam is the like adores his dad.
Yeah.
And Halloween has just sort of gone off the rails a bit, but is clearly very, very successful, very popular, doing just that.
There's good money in going off the rails. That's what I've always said.
But yeah, overall, I think it's
just that.
I think it's kind of scary enough. I think the characters are interesting enough. Pretty decent all round. Well, yeah, good.
Yeah, I agree. I also wanted to say the lettering in the beginning. I do like the kind of subtle shift for everything's black and white except the demons, spirit, whatever, talking through the wife shifts to the kind of wiggly balloons and the red lettering. I think it was a good touch to start introducing colour before we get the big 2-page spread of the theme park.
Agreed. That's a good touch.
Overall, though, I think lettering is pretty consistent. I think it isn't all the biggest, most interesting things, but I think it's pretty solid.
Doesn't get away in the way of the art or anything like that.
No, and I think in terms of art, it does stay good at doing kind of both small details and kind of portraying emotions really well. I think there is some distress some believable distress with Arthur after he's, accidentally killed his wife intentionally. It's all it's kind of a.
I mean, in court, America.
Did he intend to kill her? Yes.
I still think it's murder. It's not murder in the first degree. It's murder in the second. It's not manslaughter, and it's not self-defense.
It's
murder in the second degree.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're swimming in the waters of murder.
As you do.
I guess one last thought. I really like the mascot design. Did you ever see our Real Monsters?
Yes. Yeah.
And I feel I'm not giving that delivery the punch it requires.
Real Monsters.
Just ran between 94 and 97 for our younger listeners, but they reminded me of those designs, and that had a little nostalgic tickle in my brain.
Did anyone else spend quite a while trying to figure out who was Danny DeEvil, who was Old Nick, and who was the Fun? Or was that just me?
I kind of read that as basically in order that they were presented and accepted that as fact to me.
Yeah, that was my assumption, but then started to question it in my own mind, but I'm pretty sure.
What would I
can't explain why, but the Fun is the scariest in terms of just name alone.
Yeah. What's
don't know
fun
what
about
don't know what it is, but
that? But good overall. Enjoyed it.
Yeah, me too. I like the chances of this getting interesting. I also think Josh Williamson has done some other cool horror comics. I know I'm the only one, but I'm going to always say, anyone else read Ghosted?
No,
Yeah.
but one day one of
Just
us will
me.
have read it and we can answer that question when it inevitably comes up again and say, well, yes, we have.
Sorry.
No,
Am I really right or wrong that did Josh Williamson do Birthright?
yes.
Right. I've read Birthright and I like Birthright.
I feel like that's less horror.
Oh yeah, not
almost
one of
everywhere.
horror things, but I think that's kind of probably my entry point with Josh Williams will be through his other.
Yeah, fair.
Did you write a lot of Flash?
Yes, like the Rebirth Flash. I don't know about a lot, but definitely some.
Right.
I don't know how long it ran.
Yeah, I think I've read some of that as well.
And Nailbiter.
Oh yeah, I've never read Nailbiter, but long since been one of those like to read comics.
It's good. No, would recommend.
Cool.
I don't remember if I had a point, so I'm going to assume I didn't. Angela, would you like to introduce our second book?
Yes.
Unless anyone's got anything to.
I don't have anything to add.
I think I was all wrapped up.
There we go. Fine. So the second one is a bit of a weird one. So it's Nightfall double feature number 1 by Vault. So it's like an anthology because there's 2 books in one, sort of. It's a bit of a weird one. It is taking that old, you go and see a double feature of a horror film, except that you're not going to see the full feature in this instance. You're going to see the first issue of each feature. Doesn't make sense. Nonsense is my brand. Right, so...
Just keep saying it.
Just keep saying it, it'll catch on. So Nightfall double feature consists of 2. Cemeterians, which is written by Daniel Kraus. The artist is Marn House. The colorist is Kurt Michael Russell, and the letterer is one of my favourites, Jim Campbell. So the lettering is going to be good. We'll briefly talk about that and then briefly talk about the other and then talk about them together. So the Cemeterians, basically there's this little girl, Violet, who's having an MRI scan and the doctor spots something horrific on it and has to dissect her stuffed animals and finds out they're full of bones. Meanwhile, an army type, I think she's army, she could be Air Force. Anyway, Colonel Mizrahi?
I was going Mizrahi.
Yeah, Mizrahi.
There we go. She rocks up with Alan Hogarth and introduces him to Ivy Bell. Now, Alan Hogarth is a scientist who was like trying to record near-death experiences and, nearly killed people in the process. And Ivy is basically a pastor, a reverend, a religious type. And she's putting them together because that's what you do when you're trying to investigate bones and stuff. They discover that there's weird cases of bones cropping up all over the place, in pianos, killing people via corsets.
Teddy bears, the like.
They're in teddy bears. They're all over these bones. So they have to go and try and find what's going on. They end up at a town where mysteriously there are no bones in the bodies. Larry the grave digger has a nice pile of bodies with no bones in them and shows them. So the question is there a connection between these bodies with no bones and the bones that keep cropping up? And I'm not going to give anything away when I say yes, there is. So that's that one. The second one is called Adensian, and that is written by David Andre and Tim Daniel. The artist is Chris Sheehan. The colorist is Jason Wordy. And the letter is one of our favourites, and World Design. So this is different. Again, this is kind of a bit more... This is different horror. This isn't Bones. This is a family. If you have a family... first of all, you have an opening, sort of a cold opening with a guy and a caravan, we would call it here. I assume they call it a trailer in America. That, seems to have evil hands in. It's just how it is. And we have that as an opening, and he drives off into the night, and then we switch to a family. So you've got Helene, who's the mother, and her daughters Maya and Lily. And they're on a road trip in an RV with her husband-to-be Richard. So he's the stepfather. Lily seems to get on with him. Maya seems to hate the whole situation. And it's not going well for her. And obviously, these two things are going to intersect at some point, and indeed they do. And they end up, basically, the mother ends up in the caravan with the arms, the evil arms. More hands, but I'm trying to keep it brief. So yeah, it's kind of weird because they're two quite different stories. The art's quite different in both of them, to a certain extent. But there's your double feature. Thoughts?
I have many.
Go for it. Are they about bones?
So the Bones story, Cemeterians, kind of immediately reminded me of Evolution. David Duchovny.
Yeah.
Not that Evolution, although I knew that was coming as soon as I said it out loud.
That's the only one I care about.
Evolution from Image that came out, I want to say in 2017 it started, that was kind of all around the world. People were like rapidly evolving and getting weird.
Oh, I remember this.
Yeah, and it's kind of the same story unfolding from loads of different points of view and different people investigating it. It felt like a very similar kind of setup. There's more characters in Evolution, but this felt similar in the fact that it's like we have a religious person and we have a scientist investigating it, which in Evolution we had a scientist and a nun, but they weren't together. Maybe they ended up together. Can't remember. But kind of a similar vibe of something weird's happening, and we've gathered up the only people who can solve it. This one scientist and this one reverend.
Yeah.
For reasons. I was expecting this to be quite straight horror, and then with it being Nightfall, which is Vault's imprint, but then the double feature thing kind of made sense that this felt a little bit more like sci-fi mystery than straight horror, I think.
Yeah.
Equally with Denizen, I think that went more straight horror, but felt more kind of B-movie-ish.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think both of them are well written, and I think the art is good. My main kind of complaint or question or whatever you want to call it was, why? Why is this
a double feature?
Yeah, this kind of feels like Nightfall, as this is not the first series from the imprint. We've had the Autumnal, the Plots, Resonant, I think, was Nightfall as well.
Yeah.
I'm kind of not sure why this isn't the Cemeterians and Denizen, and they're both their own things. I don't really know why these are coming together.
No, or even if this was an anthology series, but each issue just told one. I mean, do we know how many these are going to run for? Are these?
I tried to find out earlier and didn't come back with an answer, so I'm not sure.
So yeah, I don't know. Maybe you call it, sorry, nearly dropped my stuff. You call it the sort of overarching Nightfall name, but yeah, maybe complete a story first. Having said that, in general, I agree with you. Like, I think they are well written. I think, again, the dialogue is quite believable amongst all of the characters in both sets of stories. Although it gets a little bit kind of sappy. I never think it gets saccharine in the Denizen when they're talking about like the
he's the bestest man in the world and she's the bestest woman. Yeah.
And although it's dead sappy, I also think it has a sort of ring of believability to it as well. And
there's a truth to that.
Having that kind of quite grim backstory, but coming out of it of being a sort of overly enthusiastic person, I think is surprisingly bright for as you say, something ostensibly horror. Of course, that just means it's all going to be like horribly whipped away at some point. I think the art in both books is good. I'd probably marginally prefer the Cemeterians. I really like that sort of very shady, very creepy look, and it has a a huge range of color in it, which I think keeps the art like really interesting.
That's true.
And the whole bone thing is just, I don't know, it's kind of an interesting mystery. Like, where are these bones coming from, and why are there loads of floppy bodies? And because they are just parts of a story, I think both of them are really going to hinge on how they manage the landing. Like, how do they explain this, and is that satisfying? And that essentially just sounds like the criticism of anything. But they both, I think, set up. The first one sets up a compelling mystery. I think the second one sets up a compelling group of characters. And they both, I think, could be successful or could be boring.
It's weird when you said about the sappy stuff. I mean, this is how my brain works, apparently. When you said it was a bit sappy at the end, I was thinking of the Cemeterians and the whole bit with the hand in the bed. Oh, yeah.
I thought that was... that actually I thought was quite a nice rug pull of a trope, where it sort of
liked it.
Sort of suggests they were both good. Like, they've ended up in a single motel room in a bed together, and they start off not disliking each other, but certainly coming from different ideological perspectives. And then there's this sort of will they, won't they moment where they're both in bed together, and it kind of almost happens, and then it's some bones. It's more bones.
I love that.
And not in the
favourite bit of either of them.
Literal bones. But I thought that was quite a fun little sort of rug pull. It almost went down the path you expect, and then twisted at the end.
Does really work. I think their relationship was built up quite well. I think the back and forth when they kind of start arguing as soon as they meet before kind of realising that they're on the same page is really well done and does feel believable for people who believe completely opposing stuff.
I think with their backgrounds as well, it sets up why they're both quite defensive over their positions.
Yeah, definitely.
The Reverend's been excommunicated, and
the scientist's in disgrace for nearly killing people. But it was in the name of science, damn it.
Oh, Garth. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So overall, actually, I enjoyed this quite a bit. It's probably, as you say, I think the major criticism, or not criticism, but just bewilderment as well. Yeah, why do they sort of exist together? It's 83 pages long, which,
admittedly, quite a big chunk of that in our PDF is variant covers, because this is Vault.
So many variant covers. I love you for your variant colours, Vault. One day Vault are going to put out something that is literally just variant covers. There's no comic.
Variant covers. There's no
just book. The variant covers.
Just look at all the artists we know.
It might be more like 55 pages long, because 30 of them will be covers. But I enjoyed both stories, and I think they both set up the potential to be good. They just got to stick their landing, really, I think. And I would rather they were short. If this was done in 2 or 3 issues, 2 or 3 segments of this story, I think that would be enough for me. Maybe 4, but
it's weird because I can kind of see Denizen being like a one trade kind of and done deal, but I could see Cemeterians going for as long as they want.
Today bones, tomorrow intestines.
Really thought you were going to say Tomorrow the World then, but
no. I mean, there's lots of ways you could go with that body part wise.
Yeah.
Start off with the skeletons, move on to the soft tissues.
Yeah.
Just not happy with any of that, but thank
you. Displeasing.
I apologise.
Yeah, I think I've covered everything I wanted to on that one.
Yeah, me too, I think.
Ready to move on?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so my introductory pick is Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Saturday Morning Adventures #1 from IDW, written by Eric Burnham, arted by Tim Latty, coloured by Sarah Meyer, lettered by Sean Lee, and assisted editorially by Nicholas Nino. The story in this issue is called VR in Deep Trouble, and is essentially, there's a big storm out, the Turtles need something to do, Donnie's made a VR machine, they all play it, they get struck by lightning, shenanigans. And that's how that story plays out. It is sort of like a spiritual successor to the 90s cartoon. Not that there was, particularly much plot to carry on with, but it's definitely got that, like, strong in that art style. It's aimed at a younger audience. Boy, did it remind me that I'm 34. It also led me to be pretty impressed by the sort of mainline TMNT series, because they take some of this stuff, which is wildly goofy at times, and sort of make it work for the most part in a fairly straightforward comic.
Yes.
Here you're introduced to four brothers you may not know: Michelangelo, Donatello, Raphael, and Leonardo, and their rat dad, Splinter. It does in fact feature pretty much any character you could shake a stick at in the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles franchise. They all satisfyingly look like the original cartoon characters. I think it has that sort of aspect of playing on the idea of video games in a way which I think is sort of surface level in a kind of childlike way. That, I don't know, I guess what I'm trying to say is that I feel I'm too old for this comic, despite it touching a lot of nostalgic little positives. A lot of the sort of humor and stuff, I think, is just I kind of chuckled to myself, but
yeah,
it was fun. It was fun, and I think it's successful at what it's doing. I'm just not the audience anymore, and that makes me a little bit sad.
See, I pretty much completely agree with that. I think in terms of art, Tim Lattie does a great job of capturing like the aesthetic of the cartoon. I think Eric Burnham proves that he's just good at writing stuff, because he's written mainstream Turtles, like the ongoing, and written this. And I think it shows that he's got a good understanding of how the Turtles work in different contexts.
Their voices are authentic.
Yeah. And it's interesting because I think the characters are really different between the ongoing series and between like the cartoon version, but they manage to have the same kind of base, even if who they are as characters is definitely different between the two series. And I agree, I think this was fun and kind of all ages. But what got me questioning it is, if we're not the target audience and we watch the animated series,
who is?
Kids right now have got their own recent Turtles series. There's been like, 5 in the last few years or something? There's constantly new Turtles.
So many.
And I feel like they probably have some comic equivalent, probably maybe not IDW and maybe not as, but like the Sonic comic used to exist. I'm sure there is some Turtles comics available, or Turtles all ages graphic novels. Admittedly, I haven't looked, but I'm under the impression that there will be Turtles stuff aimed at kids. So I'm kind of questioning, like, while I think this is well intentioned, if we're the people who were into the cartoon as kids and we're like, yeah, it's fun, but I don't care, and kids will probably have new Turtles stuff to look at. I feel like if you show this to a kid who watches the like current Turtles animated series, they're just gonna be like, this is wrong, take it away.
Yeah, these aren't my Turtles.
Yeah, this was my question, because it was very nostalgic. Saturday morning, I remember in the days sitting down and watching it on a Saturday morning, and the style is, and I had a very big nostalgia kit, because I was like, man, this is taking me back 30 plus years to when I used to read. Oh God, I'm having a midlife crisis these days. Back to when I used to read the original comics based on the Saturday morning cartoon. I used to do that. But I do think, I'm like, well, it's like, do the children understand these references? Like, these are not their Turtles. Are they going to be, is it going to be like the parent, like, hey kids, read this. This is what I used to read when I was your age. Is it what does that even work? Because I mean, I read stuff my parents read, but I was a weird kid. So I'm like,
and an even weirder adult.
I know, right? But it's like, I don't think children do that anymore, do they? I don't know. But it is like, it's nostalgic for the older people, but it's not going to be nostalgic for the younger people because that's not nostalgia for them. They have their own new current thing, and Saturday morning cartoons aren't a thing anymore. I don't believe they're even a thing in America. I mean, they have them, but they have them on a, it's like, it used to be on the main channels. Yeah. Now they just stream it on the streaming services, of which there are many. It used to be kids used to get up early on a Saturday morning so they could steal the television so they could watch the cartoons. Yeah. And that doesn't happen now. They have it on their own little, I don't know what the little channels, they have their own channels for kids now. They've thrown them CITV, CBeebies.
Cartoons never stop.
Whatever. Cartoon Network is a thing. Ninja. But there isn't that feeling of, rushing and stealing the television because there's only one television in the house and you don't have tablets and you don't have any of that jazz. Children aren't going to understand any of that. I also wonder whether children are going to understand some of the references in that, because, like, I Capture the Flag is a very American game. I don't know. I never played as a kid, but we've already established we're a child.
Particularly in like video game.
And the video games, like at the end where you have a video game cartridge. You have
that's true.
And it's pinned against the wall. Will a child understand this? And it's like, yes, Donnie, you've done some video games, but they're very 80s, 90s, guy. They're not really.
It's a Super Mario 3 reference. So you're right. This is aiming for our age.
Yeah.
And as I say, I still think it's successful at what it does. I just sort of don't care very much. And I think that's not to say that that's a bad thing. And I think if somebody were to read this and find it, funny and like the nostalgia is enough to keep them sort of entertained by it, all power to you. I don't think this is a bad comic by any stretch of the imagination.
No.
I've tasted better turtles. Let's take that. Slightly strange.
It's gone very dark now. It's gone very dark.
If I hadn't seen such riches, I could live with being poor. James, sit down. That's where I quote from.
I'll take it. It's not quoted enough.
One thing I am very pleased about is Mikey is the ultimate hero, and that is correct turtles.
I do like, though, as well, how it was like Leonardo's like, we shouldn't be doing this. This is a bad idea. And then he just goes along with it anyway. And then he's proven right. And it's like, you're a terrible leader.
Hey, if everyone would just listen to Leo straight away.
True.
Nothing goes wrong.
But he doesn't stand his ground, does he?
No, he gets baited by Raphael and...
Yeah.
That's enough.
All goes south. Some things never change.
Nostalgia.
Indeed.
But there it was. It was nice to revisit for one issue, but I think that's where I'll jump off on that one.
Yeah,
it's basically one and done anyway. It's like that's the story. Like you could go for the next story, but equally, that's done.
Yeah, I wonder. There's a part of me that thinks, is the brand power of Turtles just enough that, and our kids just broadly out? Like I remember reading comics when I was a kid, and you'd get a page full of characters. I didn't care whether I knew their names or who they were. Like if they looked cool, I was like, right, that guy's got a red cape. That's cool. Look at this guy's horns. That's rad. And that was enough. So part of me wonders, is the Turtle brand just strong enough that kids will still enjoy this?
I mean, there's definitely. If you know a kid, I don't know any kids, but if I knew a kid who was really into Turtles, I guess that would be the way to find out. Like, are you into Turtles enough, though?
Enough, yeah.
I know kids, but they're not into Turtles, so...
It's time to know better, kids. That sounds creepy.
I mean, it's put my tasting better Turtles into stark perspective.
It's one of those things like Ethan Page, who is a wrestler, has a vlog series where he literally just goes to toy stores in America and buys like old Power Rangers toys and shit like that. So it's entirely aimed at me. But he's constantly talking about like, yeah, now I'm buying all the Power Rangers stuff for my kids to play with. And so when they're old enough, and everything he talks about that he's buying for his kids, I'm always like,
you don't have any kids.
We're like the same age, Ethan. And if I had kids and I was trying to force like, no, Tommy's the best one because he's like, he has a dragon. I feel like I couldn't convey to a child why that was cool when it's like.
When they know it's Billy.
TV has come on 30 years. Yeah, Billy's pretty great. You know what I mean? It's like kids' TV and like animation has changed so much. And right, we still, I assume there's still new Power Rangers. I don't even know.
I think there absolutely are. Like, I think they still make Power Rangers TV series. So that somebody must be watching them.
Ethan Page, I guess.
Yeah, it's probably 30 somethings.
Yeah, but every time he talks about like getting his kids into the stuff he was into in the 90s, I do think, I feel you, but how much is it just you forcing your kids to be into the same shit you were to justify you buying all the Power Rangers crap?
Maybe it's just the excuse he needs to convince his partner why you spent 10 grand on action figures in the last month.
It's like, I'm buying them because it's an investment for our kids.
We don't have any kids. Shh.
What if we do?
I think that's true though across all of media though, because it does feel like we're in a constant nostalgia hole. I mean, even if you look at new stuff like Stranger Things is very much, horror in the 80s and that sort of thing. And there's nothing new is what I'm saying. But I think even like long-term franchises, like if you think about Marvel now, and this is going to make everybody feel old, but, you know, people who were, you know, maybe in their early 20s when Iron Man came out, they could conceivably have, you know, teenage kids now who, you know, are into Avengers. I know, right? Scary, isn't it? They could conceivably have kids now who are now old enough and experiencing that. So you're like second generation with a lot of these. And it is because we're trying to hook the parents in. So it does feel like this is just media generally is stuck in a nostalgia hole of like what your parents like. Your parents liked Marvel films when they were new, so you will like them. We will pump out more content. And then the parents get pissed off because they're like, but everything should still be for me. And it's not.
Yep, I think there's tons of that. I do think like there is good new stuff does eke out. It's covered in a cloud of, as you say, like raw nostalgia. And unfortunately, it means that some good stuff, Final Space, gets cancelled. Final Space, bring back Final Space. Make
Justice for Final Space.
That was so good. Oh, shame. I'm all sad. But I agree with you, Angela. I think like we are sort of obsessed with our childhood because the future is terrifying.
Pretty much, yeah.
Next book.
Okay, so interestingly, this is set in the past, so there is no future here. Hellboy in Love, #1.
I wasn't ready for it. There is no future.
Nonsense is my brand. Hashtag there is no future.
Get it trending. Right, anyway, back to it. So, Hellboy in Love #1 from Dark Horse. What a shock. So the writer is Christopher Golden, who I think this is the same Christopher Golden who writes actual prose horror books. I didn't bother looking him up. I assume he is. The artist is Matt Smith, not the actor, I assume. The colorist. A lot of assumptions in this. I know, I'm making lots of assumptions on the script. The colorist is Chris O'Halloran, who is an excellent colorist, and anyone who says otherwise is wrong. The letterer is Clem Robbins. So it's Goblin Night Part 1, this. There are only 2 parts as far as I can fathom. But it's a very basic story of Dr. Bransfield, who is sort of an archaeological historian type, is on a train with a suitcase. When goblins attack to steal the suitcase, Hellboy steps in to, fight them off because that's his job. And he has to try and retrieve the suitcase, and the goblins get away with it because Hellboy's not very good at his job. And he and Dr. Bransfield must pursue the goblins and recover the suitcase because inside is an artifact that relates to Dr. Bransfield's vast sprawling theory about, and I'm going to pronounce this wrong, Sauron Artir, the Art of Fire, all to do with witches and wizards and magic and hell. So yeah, and that's basically the plot. There isn't much more to it than that. Dr. Bransfield clearly finds Hellboy attractive, and I'm not judging her for that. Discuss.
So Hellboy's attractiveness. I enjoyed this quite a bit. I think Christopher Golden does a pretty good Mignola impression in terms of like the script and the writing. I think Hellboy portrays a more like sort of positive version of Hellboy than you tend to see in the Mignola books, but also it's happening kind of 20 years before they're set. So I think it's fair to assume that Hellboy wasn't always like fairly depressed. So I'm cool with that. I think the art also does a pretty good Mignola impression. It doesn't have the same kind of very stylized shading, but the goblins' faces look very like convincingly of the universe. As you said, Angela, I think the story's dead straightforward, but I think it serves it very well as just kind of a vehicle for these characters and what is ultimately, I mean, it's called Hellboy in Love, so it's obviously going to be a bit of a romance to it. I like that concept that there's this kind of society of witches who shared knowledge and could communicate way before sort of sea travel and the idea of different cultures, as they say in here, cross-pollinating is remotely a thing. I think that's quite a cool concept. I like, what's she called again?
Dr. something.
Dr. Bransfield. So I'm real bad with names. But yeah, I like Dr. Bransfield. She's cool and like capable and is a good foil to Hellboy, who is kind of expecting to be in charge and to know, well, I guess he does know a bit more about the goblins, but Dr. Bransfield just goes like headfirst into the adventure. So yeah, I like their relationship. I think the art is good. I think the story is simple but entertaining, and a bit like the Nightfall ones, over sort of 2 issues. I think that's going to be a pretty satisfying little Hellboy sort of pulp story. I'm into it.
I am less into this. A lot of recent kind of Hellboy series that I've read, like the minis, or it came up more when I was doing Pull or Pass, where we seem to read constant Hellboy spin-offs every month, or BPRD. PRD? That's right. Yeah,
that's right. Yeah.
Spin-offs and just Mike Mignola verse spin-offs, and every single first issue I read, I was like, okay. If I was way more into Hellboy, maybe I would need this. But sure. I've read core Hellboy and some spin-offs, and I like Hellboy, but I feel like at this point, every new Hellboy thing I read, I'm like, sure, okay. But I'm very much not the target audience, which brings us on to the thing I'm obsessed about with this book.
What a twist.
So, because this is 1979, that this is set, and it is the past, when I saw Dr. Bransfield sat on a train with headphones on, my immediate thought was, how's she doing that then?
Yeah, because we only have those big,
which is I can help with that.
Oh.
Go on.
I was just going to make a glib joke.
You can make a glib joke, Will, because I may be wrong. But I did watch an episode of a very old, I can't remember, it was one procedural, it may have been Columbo, where there was a guy who was wearing, I mean, they were much bulkier than that, and it was set in about 1980, but there were headphones that were quite bulky like that. I think this is actually an error, but I'm just saying you could come up with the reason, because clearly she wouldn't. Or maybe the magic.
Well,
but you know.
My follow-up was, I assume that they're trying to claim she's listening to a Walkman. However, this is the 27th of June, and the Walkman came out on the 1st of July. So, how does she have a Walkman early? That's the real question.
Clearly,
That's the Hellboy I want. Tell me how she got
sorcery.
that. Tell me how this throwaway character got a Walkman like 4 or 5 days before. I mean, she's already got it, so I'm guessing it's at least 5 days.
She's one of the beta testers.
She works for Sony on the side.
Yeah, clearly. You got to fund yourself somehow, haven't you?
It's a niche question to ask, but yeah, my main question here is where's she getting those headphones from?
I think that's a very fair criticism. Now I hate this book.
Now I feel like Angela when she was complaining about sash windows in
Shadow Service.
Shadow Service had sash windows too soon.
It did. They were like, it was nearly a century out, damn it.
At least I'm only a few days, but other than that, I think that's my only complaint. Yeah,
just the headphones.
Bad Walkman continuity. I think Matt Smith's art is great, which I'm not gonna lie, it feels like Folklords was just an audition to get the job drawing Hellboy. I don't know if he was already drawing bits of Hellboy first, but I feel like he was just drawing goblins and like, hey, I can draw goblins jumping onto a train.
Look at my portfolio, yeah.
His art's great though, and Chris O'Halloran's colouring is always good. I thought he was in a blood contract with Image to just draw horror comics, to colour horror comics for them and nothing else, but here we are.
He's expanded his range.
Yeah, he's got range. He's
publishers, at least.
Yeah. This isn't the most horror-y of books, but I guess he's allowed to colour other stuff as well.
He colours Time Before Time, which isn't
always scary.
Isn't always scary.
But yeah, that's most of them. I think between what you guys have said and my obscure complaints, we've covered everything I had for this.
Yeah, I can. I haven't read as much of the like Hellboy Mignolaverse spin-offs, but I can see where you're coming from. Like, I'm glad this is a 1 of 2 because I think 2 issues, I'm into it. If this was 1 of 12,
yeah, I don't know.
That's probably
absolutely.
So I do appreciate if you've read tons of this stuff that this is maybe for the purists. But I think as somebody who enjoyed the main Hellboy series, pretty much nothing else. Not that I didn't enjoy it, I just didn't read it. This was like a nice step back into Hellboy world.
I guess that's the thing. If you haven't tried loads of different spin-offs and you just dip back in, it's probably a lot more rewarding.
Yeah.
Well, that's me as well, because I've read the Hellboy, but I haven't read all the spin-offs of the Hellboy. So this was quite a nice
saturation.
Little,
Admittedly, I don't think I've read any full spin-off series. It was always just like, we'll read the first issue of this Witchfinder series. We'll read the first issue of something else. Some kind of, is there a detective book he does? I can't even remember.
Probably. But my question is, I mean, it's, this is the October roundup. There was a lot of horror books because, October. Hellboy in Love, why isn't it being released in February for Valentine's?
It's a bloody good question. I would say because the trade will be out, but if it's only 2 issues, I don't know if that's even how this is going to work.
Who knows?
It could be because it's still called Hellboy in Love #1, and then the story is called...
True, it could be a long-spanning...
Goblin Knight Part 1 of 2. So I think there might still be more issues in this series. They just will be little 2 or 3 part story. Yeah.
That could be true.
So I think they could still work up to... Maybe that's where the big finale is. They get to February and finally Hellboy's in love.
That's when they kiss.
Yeah, that's when they do a kiss. So do we just need to consider our favourites?
Yes.
Overall, for somebody who constantly says I'm like not that into horror, I actually enjoyed this month. I think this was a pretty strong serving.
Nothing as scary as Saturday Morning Adventures. I agree.
No, Saturday Morning Adventures was the most terrifying. I mean, when Krang showed up, yikes! Don't get me started on Bebop and Rocksteady. There were a few in there that I didn't remember that the Rat King was from the cartoon.
Yeah, with that like weird mask bandage.
He's
thing.
much tamer than the mainline IDW series.
Yeah, in the main IDW stuff, he is like hardcore terrifying. In this, he's kind of goofy.
And for that reason, TMNT is my favourite book. No, that isn't true. It's a bit of a funny one, but I think I'm going to give it to Nightfall double feature because I think there's probably the stories that have the most potential for me to perhaps be something pretty good. I think they both set up, as I said earlier, one's a mystery, one's a family, but I'm interested by both. So yeah, probably just edges it for me this month. That's my number one.
Shall I go?
I mean, whatever.
Well, Will stole my number one.
Yes.
Damn it.
It's very, very rare that we come in on the same
I
page.
know, isn't that weird? I feel like, there's a crack in the wall right now. Yeah, so I'm just going to go with, Hellboy in Love because, let's be honest, Hellboy's attractive.
I mean, I'm absolutely into that as an ideal.
There you go. I'm going with that.
It's not what I was expecting, but here we are.
Throw a curveball at you all. But no, Nightfall double feature would be, recommend what Will recommends, but also Hellboy.
We all agreed last month on Bloodshot. You can agree with Will if you really want to be that person.
Every now and again, the stars align.
2 months in a row, though.
Don't get me started on Jules Verne's Lighthouse, though, because I've never read it.
Best book. Good.
My pick is going to be Dark Ride, which is probably not much of a surprise. Quite into Josh Williamson's stuff in general. I realized whilst reading this that I've read a lot of his books. I don't know. When I first read this, just really enjoyed the kind of over-the-topness of it all. And I'm looking forward to see what the point is and what the explanation is going to be for, well, just everything, I think. It's got so many questions and so few answers that I'm looking forward to see how he's going to validate all the stuff.
Mm.
Maybe he won't. That's fine too, but maybe he will.
Maybe he will. Cool.
Yeah, I think
there
that's...
we go. Yeah.
All good books, though, to be fair. I think we might not be the target audience for all of them, or I might not, at least. But again, I think it's a pretty solid month.
Yeah. Nothing that I could point out to say is actively bad.
No, I think, it's good stuff all around. And I'm sure there's other good stuff I've read and can't conjure up now, but I know I've read more comics.
Well done. Well done.
Yeah, I'm sure we've reviewed other stuff at biggerthancapes.com.
Nice. And
some of it will make sense.
Some of it will make sense. And some of it will be nonsensical ramblings. So we've been Bigger Than Capes, collectively, Angela, Will, and Zach. Sorry, I wanted to call you Matt then, and I was looking at you.
I know.
Who the fuck is this guy?
I could see the M on your lips.
We'll be back, I guess, next week with another episode about something else. With sign-offs like that. I keep signing off in increasingly weird ways. Angela, Will, you got anything?
I don't know. I mean, I'm going to go back. I don't know. Keep on trucking and see to it. That was one of my favourites of yours. That was one of my favourites of yours that we did several weeks ago that I think is a perennial favourite.
I know we've done Keep On Trucking and we did Keep On Keeping On.
Keep on keeping on. Yeah, we did.
Keep smiling. It might never happen.
I think that's a good place to leave it.
Yeah.
It's slightly weird.
Bigger the Capes.